Being a young kid during the PS2 era, I had focused my gaming attention towards titles that were more well-known and mainstream with other players around the world. Games like Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid 3, just to name a few, were among other legends on the same platform that still remains #1 as the most sold video game console of all time, the PlayStation 2. One night I went to my cousin Cameron's house to play a game he introduced me to, called Twisted Metal. Admittedly, I only remember bits and pieces of playing the first Twisted Metal game on PlayStation 1. I remember my brother played it more than anyone else. It wasn't until I was a few years older that Cameron showed me one of the darkest and yet greatest entries of the Twisted Metal series, known famously now as Twisted Metal Black. From my memory, the previous Twisted Metal games didn't consist of a consecutive storyline, or if they did, it was pretty vague. Honestly, it's hard to remember. I could just Google it, but I'm feeling lazy. The games got their fame from the intense gameplay. The vehicular combat was a masterpiece and ultimately grew the game's popularity like flies in a spider's web. Each character has a unique personality and vehicle to match, with brief descriptions and attributes. Most famous is Sweet Tooth, the murderous clown psychopath that drives the demented ice cream truck. There are obviously a lot more famous titles within the Twisted Metal universe, but by far the one that knocks all of the others out of the water to this day, in my opinion, is Twisted Metal Black. The reason I feel this game is so unique is because it has a dark, disturbing, and even sometimes emotional storyline. Each character you can play as offers their own cutscenes fit with backstories, flashbacks, their goals for completing the competition, although this time around, there's a major twist. Calypso is the frontrunner for the Twisted Metal competition. He seeks out all of these depressed rejects of society and offers them a chance at redemption to win whatever their heart desires. In order to get your wish, you have to choose who you want to play as and fight your way through each of their journeys to become the deadliest road racer of all time. Well, fuck me. Every single character has a special storyline? This might take a while, but I've been more than excited to discuss Twisted Metal Black in particular because I remember it being such a fantastic experience. What I basically want to do is talk about each and every driver's fate within Twisted Metal Black and why they all stand out after this time. Keep in mind, there's a lot of grotesque imagery in this video as well, and I usually don't say that for my videos, but given the time period, it's pretty disturbing to have to see this stuff, at least it was for me when I was a kid. No two stories are the same, and each features a dark, twisted storyline fit with the characters' flashbacks to their normal life before they were committed to the asylum. The stories are told in cinematic ways with various cinematography choices, so it's high time I shut up and dive right in. Keep in mind, this game isn't by any means child-friendly, as I said. I'm surprised with the amount of disturbing imagery they show, considering a lot of us probably played Twisted Metal Black as children, let alone the first two games. Granted, lots of people like me have looked at the series over the years and determined it as one of the greatest classic video games ever, but I definitely don't remember the graphic backstories and serious tone. Well, there's one more thing I want to mention before I get to the game. My apologies. Twisted Metal 1 and 2, although I didn't play them as often as Black, I know they were at least full of high-octane violence, pixelated blood and guns and explosions, and best of all, a vehicle designed for specific characters. There was a high level of comedy in the dialogue as well. Twisted Metal Black is nothing like its predecessors, not even close. This is what you get when you switch from Nickelodeon Jr. to Shudder TV. It has violent scenes such as eye gouging, throat slitting, cannibalism, even throws in a surgery sequence at one point. Seeing this as a kid was definitely a huge switch from the previous Twisted Metal games I was used to. Funny enough, even though everyone's story is different for the game, they all begin in the same place, the asylum.
They took everything from me. Then they put me in this hole. So I could sit and think all day long about what I'd lost.
Junkyard Dog is a southern pilot who was locked up when Calypso came out of the shadows and embraced these troubled souls for a so-called second chance at life. All it means is they have to be the final man standing in the competition to get what they want. Calypso is the founder of the Twisted Metal competition, and his appearance has changed a few times during the series. He's capable of granting revenge to those who seek it, and offers a punishment for those who have wronged the main characters as they see fit to do so. Junkyard Dog drives a tow truck, which matches his personality as a backwoods farmer who once saw a normal life. In between each and every halftime segment of the game, there's always a cutscene of the character you play as getting knocked out. During these knocked out cutscenes, you learn everything you need to know about the guy or girl you're playing as, or at the very least, you're given more context behind who they are. He remembers his old life, when he was happy, and a farmer, I guess. Someone had flown their plane directly above him, spraying some sort of toxic chemical that rendered him unconscious for some time.
I couldn't breathe, and my heart was beating so fast. Thank the Lord, I passed out real quick. I thought I was dead. I must have been out for hours. And when I woke up, well, my God, what had happened to me?
Once the character awakens, it's right back into the fight. These overall dark tones are definitely not what categorize Twisted Metal as a genre, especially considering a lot of fans still argue over its legacy today. With the most recent announcement of the Peacock original show, I think it's safe to say a lot of people are displeased. Fans fight back and forth between whether or not Twisted Metal should be taken as a serious game with graphic images, a black and white story, or if it should be a full-blown comedy. For me, it's hard to justify. On one hand, you have the formula for a comedic yet badass vehicular combat simulator. On the other hand, thanks to Black, you do have the option of aiming more towards a respectfully gritty dark thriller, full of grotesque characters and scenery. To me, it doesn't really fucking matter. Twisted Metal is a story as old as time and surprisingly hasn't seen the light of any remakes or remasters over the years. All this nonsense aside, it's still a fun game at its core. An interesting thing to keep note of is the common theme at play here. Most of the contestants within Twisted Metal Black are after one thing: revenge. Calypso promises every contestant what their heart desires, but often a lot of them are similar with dark backstories of horrible people that they've dealt with in the past. Perfect starting example. Junkyard Dog wants revenge for the man who cucked him, the same guy who also used some sort of government top secret mutagen agent, I don't fucking know, and forever changed his appearance. During his flashback, JD remembers how he murdered his wife in cold blood, just before being sent to the asylum. Like I said, this was really dark stuff to witness as a kid. I mean, fuck, I thought I was playing Twisted Metal. This looks about as far away from Twisted Metal as I remember. If JD wins, he gets what he asked for, a chance to kill the man who ruined his life. Like some Rob Zombie grindhouse movie, he slowly inches the plane towards the poor bastard, with the propeller being his final memory. We're only getting started here, folks. There are many other, darker stories to cover. Like Brimstone, the priest who claims to have been possessed by the devil at some point in his life, when suddenly a wild Calypso appears, offering him the truth behind what happened on his darkest day. With nothing left to lose, he willingly jumps into the challenge. Another thing you'll notice is how often the characters repeat the same lines. I can't tell you how many of them say, "How could I refuse?" in an ominous tone.
How could I refuse?
How could I refuse?
How could I refuse?
How could I refuse?
How could I refuse an offer like that?
God, do you think that's enough? Anyway, Brimstone falls asleep and remembers the night the devil took him over. He was performing an exorcism on an infant when the demon had teleported itself into his body and caused him to murder everyone inside the church. When the police arrived, the devil left his body, rendering him vulnerable to the punishment he'll receive for life. Another really badass cutscene I want to mention is the helicopter fight.
You're in violation of Midtown City Code 4432. Step out of your vehicle and surrender peacefully. Time's up.
I love how the pilot gives clear and direct orders, even offers the driver a chance to step out and do the right thing. Then suddenly he says, "Time's up." After defeating him, he comedically falls towards the camera screaming bloody murder. This game was so underrated for its time, and I'm only just now realizing it. Brimstone goes to Calypso only to find out that it wasn't the devil that took over his body at all. The preacher was merely insane and went on a blood-fueled rampage within the church for seemingly no reason. Another plot twist within the whirlpool. Next up is Outlaw, a SWAT officer who somehow landed a spot in the loony bin. His backstory is pretty vague at first, but we can guess that it's probably pretty dark. Calypso offers him a second chance, an opportunity to redeem himself for a crime he never recovered from. During his knockout segment, he remembers what happened on that fateful day. He was ordered to open fire on a target inside this building, but in the process of taking him down, had let his emotions get to him, resulting in a bloodbath. He mistakenly kills the guy's wife and child alongside him. In an effort to go out the easy way, he puts his gun in his mouth, but it clicks. Outlaw cleverly states,
There was only one way out, but that way was closed.
In the end, Calypso gives Outlaw exactly what he wanted, a second chance. He's transported back to the day he was on the rooftop. This time he prepares himself to eliminate only the target. After killing him and realizing the wife and child were safe, suddenly the guy looks up, shoots back at Outlaw, doming him in the fucking face. Jesus Christ, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's still creepy, I guess. Mr. Grimm is nothing short of a troubled mind that never healed. Suffering from PTSD, he gets constant visions of his past and keeps his true identity concealed behind a human skull that's been sewn together into a mask. His story is pretty shocking, at least it was to me when I was a kid. During the Vietnam War, Grimm was taken hostage by the enemy alongside his battle buddy. They were forced to stay inside this disgustingly hot hole in the ground as his friend slowly died from his injuries, only for things to turn an ugly page when Grimm realizes what he has to do to survive.
They say the mind bends and twists in order to deal with the horrors of life. I think my mind bent so much it snapped in two.
Destined for revenge, he wins the competition and is given the opportunity to exact his revenge on the man who put them both there. He also confesses to enjoying cannibalism and says that it's all that defines him now. The next story I want to talk about, for a character named Roadkill, is probably the biggest twist I had seen yet. When we're introduced to him, we get the idea that he's some sort of wannabe gangbanger who committed lots of crimes to get where he is today. He doesn't consider himself a good person, nor can he remember anything about his past. Then you-know-who comes knocking and promises to show Roadkill the truth so long as he wins the competition. He holds up a picture of Roadkill wearing a suit with a full head of hair, which is apparently enough to convince him that Calypso knows something about his past. He could have held up any photoshopped image of the guy and said whatever story he wished, but desperation grows inside Roadkill to find the truth anyway. He has vivid flashbacks of his career when he was supposed to join his Nazi scumbag friends in planting a bomb to destroy some building. Later on, when he meets Calypso again, he finds out that he's actually an undercover FBI agent. The night that he was supposed to blow up the building, he instead ran back inside and disposed of it before it detonated. Roadkill is a hero, as it turns out, but due to his affiliation with the massive government branch, Calypso kills him in cold blood, if only to keep the Twisted Metal competition a complete secret. It's one of the darker ones in my opinion. It shows that even someone who is trying to do the right thing can ultimately pay the worst price. Now it's time to talk about my personal favorite character in the entire game.
When the lights are low in this place, you get plenty of time for thinking.
Crazy 8 is a retired boxer who suffered a major disturbing casualty, bearing witness to his own career's downfall. During one of his biggest fights, he takes a beating unlike any other and loses. The doctor who tended to his injuries was betting on his victory, which led him to lose lots of money. He even says to Crazy 8 while he's operating on him,
$20,000, McCutcheon. $20,000 I lost on you tonight.
The surgeon transforms Crazy 8 indefinitely by sewing his eyes, ears, and lips shut. Jesus Christ. Crazy 8 had some stellar voice acting in my opinion, giving off Tony Soprano vibes and acting like a hotshot with nothing to lose. This has to be the best revenge plot as well. After Crazy 8 wins the competition, he gets to see the surgeon that fucked him up for life. Using a weapon that's ideal for the moment, he ends his story with a punch.
I think that doctor, he knew payback was going to be brutal. It's funny, after all these years, still got some snap in that left hook of mine. You know, that was the first time I ever knocked someone out with one punch.
Spectre is the first lady we're introduced to in the game, being a jealous, crazed bride that never had her Prince Charming. When she was overtaken by jealousy, she killed her friend Kristen and stole her dress on the day of the wedding. Once she wins, Calypso gives her a lobotomized man who is supposed to obey her every word and will until he suddenly whispers to her that he will never love her. She snaps again and brutally kills the fucking guy. This game was designed for PlayStation 2, and I shit you not when I say I've never played a game with more twists and dark scenery than this. Darkside's story is even shadier, with her ex-boss being a crazed fucking lunatic. She accidentally spills a little bit of coffee on some important paperwork, causing Mr. Creel, her boss, to turn into Jeffrey Dahmer and screw a mask into her skull forever to be glued to her face. Calypso offers Darkseid the key to her mask, plus a shot at revenge to Mr. Creel. Funny enough, when she gets the mask key, she simply throws it away and accepts that her new face is a lot more terrifying due to the lack of expression it has. She can never be afraid, she can never be scared, she can never be angry. Shadow is much of the same as we open up to her quite literally inflicting harm upon herself. The name Kelly is engraved into her skin. She was your typical thick-thighed goth GF until her and her friend Kelly were attacked by grown men who claimed they were witches. Kelly was tossed into the water and drowned, begging Shadow to exact her revenge on the men. By the end of it, Shadow is given voodoo dolls of the men and gouges their fucking eyes out. I told you this game was pretty graphic, and although this stuff seems laughable now by most, you can't deny for the time it was pretty ballsy to include such a dramatic death scene. Last but certainly not least, we have the star of the show, the man responsible for multiple homicides and laughs within the Twisted Metal universe.
3 months in the nut house. It was the longest I'd ever been confined. So a few people had been killed. It wasn't my fault.
Please, no, I got a family.
Shut up and bleed, you motherfucker.
Sweet Tooth is a very complicated character, but I'll do my best to summarize with what I remember. He's what John Wayne Gacy would have been if the guy was addicted to steroids and worked out constantly. Sweet Tooth is the most iconic character in Twisted Metal, being the mascot for the game since its release. Understandably so, I mean look at him, he's fucking awesome. Destined to live with a curse for life that places a flame on top of his head, Sweet Tooth meets Calypso and ultimately ends up not being the most impressed by him. Shrugging off the fact that if he wins the curse gets lifted, the killer clown is just excited to get back into what he loves, brutal, bloody destruction. At the end of it all, he's offered a cure for his curse. Instead, he fucking murders Calypso, shatters the vial, and continues roaming the streets looking for more victims. As dark as the other stories were, Sweet Tooth's journey is probably the scariest. The idea that he's not driven necessarily by a force or a thought, but by madness, murder, and chaos is never going to be not scary. With all of that out of the way, I think it's safe to say that this was one of the darkest Twisted Metal games to date. For me, every single story is well developed, and I enjoyed taking a seat along the characters' sides and seeing how their victories panned out. In modern games today, you don't really have as much of a theatrical portrayal with as many characters. I'm aware that there are a few side stories once you complete the game, but as far as I know, they aren't too important. They're mostly involved with Sweet Tooth and his endless reign of terror. Twisted Metal Black was by far my favorite of the series, and many of you might be scratching your heads after hearing that, but understand it like this. Twisted Metal, in my opinion, is a variable genre in and of itself. I consider it like Batman or Spider-Man, how multiple people can try the same subject with different formulas, combinations of their own unique storytelling and style. The first 2 games definitely aimed more towards high-octane visuals and comedic elements, but Twisted Metal Black was darkness all the fucking way, and I love it for that even today. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the darkest Twisted Metal game I've ever played. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this short little editorial I made. Lately I've been struggling financially and mentally with a lot of things, so to have you guys here is a dream come true, and it means a lot. Thanks again. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our channel, and thanks for checking out this video. Leave a like, comment, and since we're on the subject, enjoy yourself. Thanks for watching the content, folks.